Matt Dillahunty, how you doing, man?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
So the viewers will know by the time this posts, but my temporary title for this short conversation is, Does Matt Dillahunty have a heart?
It's a great question, and I think finally we may have an answer, although the hard skeptics will say, I know you have a picture of your heart from the surgery, but you don't know that that's really your heart. You just know they gave you a picture. So I guess if we go down the road of hard solipsism, we still don't know, but it seems that I have one and it's working better.
So, I mean, they cracked your chest open, man.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, what are we talking about? What'd they find?
I started having a number of issues. I was sluggish, had breathing problems, started putting weight back on again, and it turns out I'd had a heart attack or two, and we can't pinpoint it, but I think I know when at least one of them happened. And they did an electrocardiogram, found some issues, and brought me in for an angiogram where they were going to run basically up my arm into the heart and see if they could put a stent in. And within like 5 minutes of them being in there and poking around, they stopped and they pulled it out and they said, you're going to have surgery next week.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when I went in, I will say I didn't know what to expect. And so there's some cool aspects of this. But yeah, they sliced my chest open, cracked my ribs, spread it all open, harvested a big vein out of my leg, and put in 3 bypasses.
So are you online, like totally YouTubing and Googling, what is this procedure? What did this blockage look like, kind of thing, or what?
I did, and one of the first things I did is you can actually watch this procedure on YouTube. You can watch them crack somebody's chest open and watch the procedure. And I'm not all that squeamish, so I started to watch it. And then I was fine when they sliced the chest open, but when they grabbed the saw and started sawing through the sternum, yeah. I said, I don't really think I need to watch this right now. I'm just going to trust that the doctors know what they're doing because it won't make any difference what I know. Was
it weird? I mean, you don't have to share any more than you want to, but you know, when you're about to go under, they're going to crack your chest open and they're going to go into your heart. I mean, you know, there's a measure of risk, right? I mean, are you thinking about that kind of thing? Like, have I said my goodbyes? I don't mean to be dramatic, but I mean, that's what I'd be thinking, right?
I did some of that. I mean, I made sure that my brother came down and there were people who knew what I wanted to happen should something go wrong. So I did take, those basic steps. But I'm 52 and they had me in just about the lowest risk category there was. I'm a little different from some people. If I recognize that there's nothing that I can practically do about something and worrying about it isn't going to help at all, it's not going to prompt me to do anything, I just kind of let go. And so I remember walking in, they shaved my legs, they shaved my chest, I was laughing and joking a little bit. They put me under and I woke up 6-7 hours later with tubes and things in me. I heard about some stuff that happened, but I don't know how it would have been differently because if I died, I just wouldn't have woken up.
Well, I'm thinking like, I'm not afraid of death, but I'd be like, does Natalie have all my passwords? I think she's got all my passwords, but has anything changed, and does she have access to this? And what about that? And who does she call? And, I would be thinking logistically about what would happen if I was to not be there,
I took care of that stuff. People knew what to do should anything go wrong.
I don't worry about you having an existential crisis as much.
It really wasn't. It was, my entire focus was on the other people in my life, like you're talking about. Like, okay, what are you guys going to do with my stuff and make sure that this stuff goes to so-and-so and there were things for you. And so should it have happened, and maybe you missed out, it could have been something good, you don't know.
Video gear, probably. Man, I'd be going through your stuff. Like they're at a yard sale. Hello, Matt. Where's Matt's stuff? That's me. I don't know, man. Did you get some prayers? Praying for you, Matt. Praying the Lord's going to save you. I know the power of my Jesus. You catch any of that?
Yeah, they were more along the lines of, you may not like this, or I know it might not mean anything to you, but we're praying for you. And that was it. They didn't go beyond that. And I always have tried to take that stuff in the spirit that it's intended.
Which this is sort of how they've been trained to show compassion.
Yeah. Somebody, they feel helpless. What are they going to do? I've got my fingers crossed for you. I sacrificed a chicken for you. I didn't hear any of that. And to me, it's all the same. but at least I appreciate that there was thought. I also didn't get much in the way of negative stuff. I got more of that afterwards, and not necessarily from theists. I got it primarily from vegans who've decided to target me, even though I eat like 70-80% vegan anyway to begin with.
So that's become the new fight, huh? Everybody's gonna...
Evidently, and I have no opposition to it at all, but they're like, if you hadn't eaten animal products, you wouldn't have had to have heart surgery. And I was like, that's not quite how that works, but thanks.
It's sort of a win-win for the theist, right? Dear Jesus, please protect Matt and show him your great power and love and mercy. You wake up 7 hours later, thank you, Jesus. Right. I mean, there's no way, if you died, well, he didn't have the veil of God's protection around him.
Or it was his time, or God needed him for something else. Because there's people who think once saved, always saved, who think that I'm going to heaven despite what I do, which is always really strange for me. Why on earth why in heaven would I be going there?
Knowing the situation with your extremely, I don't know if devout's the word, because she doesn't really know anything about Christianity. All she knows is that it's true. I mean, is that fair, right? She doesn't know her Bible. She doesn't know the history of Christianity, but she's praying for your soul. Is that fair?
Probably. Honestly, my mom and I didn't talk about it much.
She was around when all this is going down. You're her son. No?
No.
You are going in to have your heart operated on, and she wasn't a part of that?
No, and I wouldn't have wanted her there anyway. My brother was in town, and he was relaying information to them, and so they were paying attention, and they didn't want a lot of details. Like, I offered to show them the picture of my heart, and they don't want to see it. But
all right. Well, I'm not trying to peer in your windows, but the idea that a parent would not be engaged. My first thought is, well, is this part of a rift because of your sort of spiritual?
It had more to do with COVID and travel. It didn't make sense. It all happened really quickly. From the time I found out I was having surgery until I was actually wheeled in was like 5 days or 4 days, and not only could they have not traveled in that time frame, but they were having their own health issues, and with the pandemic, it just didn't make sense.
I got you. And of course, you're having a #science moment the whole time. If this had happened to you decades ago, you might have been screwed. Did they have the technology to discover it? Did they have the technology to fix it? In our recent history, the answer would be no. Right?
Yeah. I was fortunate in every aspect in that the only better time to have had needed surgery would be today or tomorrow, because we just keep getting better at it. And I was in a low risk category. So yeah, if this had happened 20 years ago, it would have been a bigger risk. And 40 years ago, it would have been even worse. But
my Barbara Walters question for the day is, did this experience change you?
And actually, I sniff a little bit. Actually, yes, but who knows if it's changed me in the long term. In the short term, they tell you, here's some things you can expect, including being more emotional. Something about the surgery tends to make people more emotional, whether it's tied to the physical aspect of it or psychological. I remember I've been really angry a few times since then because I'm stuck in a recliner. I'm out of the recliner now. I can actually sleep in bed now. But I slept in a recliner for the first month and a half, almost 2 months after the surgery. And I've only been in bed now it's been 9 weeks, so a week and a half, something like that. And I would sit there and I would watch TV, and things that normally wouldn't affect me, I'd get emotional, and I was starting to tear up, and I was like, they told me I'd be more emotional after the surgery, but I didn't expect this. Whether it lasts or not, we'll see.
I don't know. Do I see you as a touchy-feely guy? Natalie says you have a sensitive side. She sees that in you. So.
You're not supposed to. Don't put that on film. Nobody should know that I can remotely.
A lot of people see, what they see is the 30-second harvested soundbite from the atheist experience, where some theist calls up and wears out their welcome or whatever, But the truth is I know you care about people. And so it's nice to see the softer side of this calloused, cold, jaded, heathen man.
Yeah, just don't let it get around. Don't spread it around. Matt has a heart metaphorically and literally. But.
Are you? I mean, you back in the game? I know you're doing the broadcast, or at least one of them, right?
Oh, I've been doing both shows since I think 2 or 3 weeks after the surgery, because once I was able to breathe and actually talk a bit, doing the shows is pretty easy for me. It's a matter of, I'm at home, I'm in my studio, everything's done remotely. So I was like, if I can sit here and talk to people who are sitting in the room with me or sit here and play a game, then I should be able to do the show. And so I did.
And what's on the horizon, man? I mean, you've got this lease on life. I don't know why I lean into these dramatic sort of catchphrases. This is life 2.0, Matt Dillahunty. But what is it that's going to drive the next, 6, 9, 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm thrilled to be above ground and ambulatory and doing well. But I'm more excited about the potential end of a pandemic. I mean, we're recording this at the first convention, the first gathering that I've been to with any people since March of 2020, in anything of any size. And it's going incredibly well. There's people here, we're having our safety precautions. And I was worried that I wouldn't be able to make it because of the surgery. And then I was worried that I would be immune compromised because of the surgery and that I'd have to be like the boy in the plastic bubble at the convention. And I remember telling them, hey, I'm not doing well compared to the past. I get winded really quickly. So could we have a chair on stage for me in case I need to sit down during that? And David's like, yes, absolutely, we can have that. My thing is that over the next 6 or 9 months, I want to try and get back to completely normal. I mean, inside of the next 6 months, I should be back to 95% or better, because technically my heart's working better now. So, and they say it takes a full year to get back to normal, but in 6 months you start,
No, you're scheduled to do magic at the American Atheist Convention Easter weekend. So, I mean, I've seen you on stage. You're covering some ground there, right? You're going to be on a Segway?
I'll be covering ground tomorrow, actually.
Yeah? At your speech at Florida Free Thought.
Yeah, they got me a Countryman set up. I went and asked them specifically for that because I don't want to have to stand behind a podium. If there's a chair, I might sit on it. I'm ready for the American Atheist thing though, because I was smart. The magic is going to take place at the fundraising dinner, and I specifically said, can we have a camera that can go to a big screen, because I'd like to do some stuff that's close up as well, and then that's the only way that people can see it in that environment. Because that's some of my favorite magic to do, is where you would need to be sitting at the table. Well, that means that I get to sit down for a good chunk of it and just shuffle a deck of cards or do something on the table rather than prancing around. But I need the exercise, so I'm moving around. As a matter of fact, we're here in Orlando, and this conference ends Sunday afternoon. And Tuesday, we have a 2-day, 2-park pass to Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure. Now, I am going to get the electric scooter to move me around so that I don't have to try to walk, 20 miles in 2 days, because that's a little much. But between the scooter and the walking, I'm looking forward to it.
Close-up magic is my favorite magic. I've seen David Copperfield and, those types of things where they've got the big props. But, it's the guy on the street who's got some tiny little object that he's able to manipulate or make disappear, and I still can't figure it out. It's not under his sleeve. He didn't have any sleeves. That stuff just blows my mind. Mm-hmm. So, I love the idea of having a close-up camera. So are you playing with cards or rubber bands? I know you got a trick that does that. I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah, there'll be some cards, some rubber bands, some other stuff that might take place more in a parlor environment, but that's only going to be part of it. I'm going to do, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be bringing out any tigers or a big
you're doing like
box
mentalism though, right? You're playing that
mentalism
game with the audience.
Yeah.
You watch Darren Brown?
I love Darren. Darren's probably one of the 2 or 3 greatest living mentalists.
He is it a photographic memory? How does he, I saw him play chess with 12 different chess masters at the same time, mm-hmm. remembering every move. And I won't spill the beans as to how he won. I will say that he won. But it must be a photographic memory, right? How else do you explain his amazing ability to recall information? I don't know. Is that something you've considered?
I can do that trick.
No, you can't.
Absolutely. I'll tell you how it's done after we're done here. But
No,
yeah.
you can't. Really?
Yeah.
I must just be an idiot. Because I was looking,
No.
thinking he must have like he must have an archive of information or a hard drive that he's able to imprint information in a almost supernatural way, right? That's what I'm thinking.
He probably has a pretty good memory. I don't know if it's eidetic or not. I can tell you that it's not that you're an idiot. It's in every case where we're doing something magic. It's we know something you don't know, and we know how to hide it from you, and we know how to manipulate how you think so that you even remember it incorrectly, because you remember him winning against all 12 of them, and that's not true.
Oh God, now my mind's all freaked out. I got to go back and watch the chess video again on YouTube. Are you? Do you think that illusionists, magicians, mentalists? Do you think they're psychologists? I mean, do you have to know how to trick the mind in the way that a good psychologist would know how to do? You know.
I think there's similarities and areas where they overlap, but they're very different. I mean, a psychologist is going to, that's going to be studied and academic, and probably more broadly focused on human kind of behavior. Whereas when it comes to being a magician, it's much more narrowly focused about deception.
Distraction, sleight of hands.
I don't know. It's funny you hear about misdirection, which is really a poor name for what happens. It's not misdirection, it's just direction.
Isn't it the hot assistant jumps out, now I'm looking over there, and while you're throwing something in your pocket? I mean, I know that's basic, but...
There's actually an old performer who would actually do that, have his assistant come out and get completely naked and then do the thing. But everybody would catch him. And that was the point. It was a
so
joke.
obvious,
It
you
was a
mean?
joke act.
Oh, I see.
Things like that can happen. But you might have seen videos like where we have like attention blindness, where you're supposed to count the number of times people are passing a basketball, and then did you see the person in the gorilla suit walk by? And most people don't the first time. So it's not so much misdirection or a need to have you look over here while I'm doing this. Anytime that I've done a trick, if it required me to get you to look over there while I did something over here, it's a trick I would never do, and I don't know too many professionals that would. We don't want the handful of people in the audience who might not have looked to catch on. And so, like a lot of times when you're doing close-up, you want somebody to look up at you or whatever else, but there are people who will just never look away from your hands because they're set on catching you. I want to be able to fool them, and if I can fool them, which I can, I win.
All right, so somebody walks in with your skill set at illusion, magic, mentalism. They're a religious grifter. It's Christmas, right? I mean, because now they can be the Uri Gellers of the world and say they've been given otherworldly power. Do you see that? Can you speak to that from your perspective?
I kind of do the opposite. I mean, when we were in Australia, I remember having a conversation with a guy on a street corner who was asking me about the TV magicians and are they doing real magic or is it just trickery? And I said, well, I can't prove to you either way, but I can do the things they do. And he's like, well, yeah, but what about, like levitation? Because I see them just levitate on the street. And I said, okay. And I walked a couple feet away and I levitated. I turn around and his, jaw's hanging down. He's like, oh my gosh. And I said, stop. Remember how you feel right now. And then I did the same thing, only where he could see it from a completely different angle and understand how it was actually done. And it was crestfallen. It was like I'd removed all the magic in the world. And I was like, no. Remember how you felt the first time. The only difference between now and then is you know something now that you didn't know before, which means you have a better understanding of reality. But it doesn't make the first time, it shouldn't make the first time any less impressive that mystery's there. I don't want to see people exploited, and I am by no way. I'm not an expert. I'm not, running around touring as a magician.
I mean, you're up front. Yeah, like what you're about to see is a trick.
Yeah.
Like James
have no
Randi
special
used to
powers
do.
that I know of.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like Darren Brown is able to do these sort of, he's emulating the psychic tricks You're not in the room, you haven't given him any information, and he's able to say all of these specific things that he's harvested from wherever about you. I mean, if he was playing it straight, it looks pretty convincing to those eager to be convinced.
Oh, I'm nowhere near as good as Darren. Let's make that clear. I'm an amateur who likes to do this stuff. You could start a religion. Darren could easily start a religion. Hell, I'm not even anywhere near his abilities, and I could start, a small cult for sure. It is kind of about the intent, and you listen to someone like Jamie and Swiss, who talks about being the honest liar. Magicians tell you they'll deceive you, and then they do. And it's one of the reasons why some of the magicians, particularly in the skeptic community, are so rabid when it comes to the psychic artists or the psychic frauds, depending on who you're talking about. As far as I know, they're all frauds if they're claiming to have magical powers. And James Randi used to say that if they are doing it by summoning demons or using supernatural powers, they're doing it the hard way.
Well, if you and I were going to grift anybody, I was talking to somebody, and I think you and I have had this conversation. What we would do is we would say, you know what, I was totally wrong that there is a Jesus, and then I would go to Christian churches and be the atheist who renounced his atheism to become a Christian, and then you and I would tour the country at the end of an offering plate. I mean, that's the grift, right? If we were people without a moral center.
That's where the money is.
Yeah, tax-free, and you kind of have a ministerial vibe about you.
I have family members who absolutely were convinced that I was going to grow up to be a preacher, and I have to acknowledge that in many ways I have. And I don't know, like tomorrow I'm going to be talking, the title of the talk is God-Shaped Holes, and I don't know all of the content. I have thoughts in my head about what I'm likely to say. But I think, and it won't be recorded, but I think if it were to be recorded tomorrow, it might look like the most obvious atheist sermon anybody's ever seen. Because the subject matter and the way I feel about it, and maybe this is because of the surgery and being more emotional or whatever else, in my head, there are certain beats that I already know I need to say this and I need to say it this way. And in that case, it starts to be more like, let me tell you about this, and you start adopting a certain cadence, and you start speaking, and you're interacting, and you're leaning forward, and you're doing this. And I'm telling you right now that they're going to try to tell you that you have a God-shaped hole in your heart.
I've been told that about me, right? Some of that I think is because pastors often are really good storytellers. So all you have to do is be a storyteller, and people will say, oh, you sound a little bit like a pastor. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, no, I'd like to think maybe I do, but I think I sound like a storyteller, But I think often the polished aspect of a religious message is so ubiquitous that a lot of people, when they hear that kind of presentation, think, oh, you sound like you were preaching a sermon kind of thing,
And if you're one to be a preacher, the best way to convince people quickly that you're a preacher and a good one is to mimic what they think a preacher is. Jerry DeWitt and I had a really long conversation about this, as he was a former preacher. And I had wanted to be a preacher. I didn't quite get there, but not only do Protestant ministers of various religions have similar cadences, but they are often just slightly different. Like if you played part of a sermon for me and said, is this a Pentecostal? Is this a Baptist? Is this an Episcopalian? Whatever. I would probably be right more often than not. And it's because within the particular doctrine, you have this almost incestuous learning and training thing where I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. I grew up listening to Southern Baptist preachers. Now I'm going to become a Southern Baptist preacher. I am mimicking what I heard before. I grew up in a Pentecostal church. I want to be a Pentecostal preacher. I'm going to mimic that. It's why Jerry and I have very different cadences, because he was a Pentecostal, I was a Southern Baptist. And yet, despite the similarities between those religious views, we can instantly spot the difference between the two of us, and not just about who won at softball.
I saw Jerry I think it was in Boston, and he gave a great presentation. But when he got worked up, I could totally see the Pentecostal preacher in him. I could totally hear it in his voice. You know, it is amazing. And I think, you know, you're right. This is what a preacher should sound like. I remember we had one, and when he would talk about your life, he'd say, in your life, you know, is that kind of thing. Is Jesus in your life? You know, ask Jesus into your life. And it was just the way that preachers said it.
It's not even limited to just preachers. I've started to be more observant about this. If you go listen to some of the gurus, they sound the same even though they're not talking on behalf of religion. The people who are giving life coaching advice, the motivational speakers, the get-rich-quick speakers, even if they're not advocating for religion, they have their own cadence because they've been listening to all the motivational speakers over the last 20 years. And they know that if they want to get, you know, this here, we are mimics. We are mimics from the instant we're born. We mimic our parents. I'm going to turn out like my mom and or my dad no matter how much I try not to. The only difference is going to be which things I hang on to, which things I let go of. And if we can convince people to let go of the things that we don't have good reason to believe, then the rest just becomes window dressing. And if we can work towards the true beliefs, now we've actually accomplished something.
I'm glad you're back on your feet. I'm glad you're healing, brother. It's good to see you.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be above ground and back in the game a bit.